Welcome to Felony Miami, where we have real conversations with real people about the criminal justice system in these United States.
Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride, Lordy Mama. Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride. Well, it's early in the morning, baby, when I ride, baby, you have a line, you have a my right side.
From Medellín to Mexico, Panama to Bogotá, Sinaloa to South Miami. In the 1980s, the South American drug trade began its assault on the shores of the USA, bringing with it money, violence, and really bad guys. The stage was set for an all-out apocalypse with society falling into a spiral of children using drugs, parents dealing drugs, and family members being murdered on the streets. Enter the DEA, a force of highly skilled and seasoned law enforcement officers with one goal: take down the drug traffickers, corner drug dealers, and end users, and stop at nothing until they're all locked up. Today, we hear the why of it from three of Miami's finest career DEA investigative professionals, whose job it was to enforce the laws, not make or interpret them. None have done it better than these guys. Are all the laws just and right? Are all the players in on the take? Get inside the minds of the soldiers on the front lines of the Miami Vice-era drug trade. Whatever you might think about them, they were only enforcing the laws that were on the books. And when there isn't justice for one, there isn't justice for all. Welcome to Felony Miami. Let's air it out. Hello and welcome back to Felony Miami. I'm your host, Joe Stone, and on today's program we have three guests, all from the investigative side of the criminal justice system. To my right, Mr. David Bolton. That's David Bolton, Private Investigators. And Bolton Investigations is the oldest and largest and most experienced private investigating agency in Coral Gables, Florida, since 1990. And they're available throughout North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And they work on all cases with professional, experienced staff consisting of former law enforcement officers with unmatched investigative experience and credentials. Thank you so much for being on the show today, David.
Thank you for having me.
And directly across from me is Mr. Jim Shedd. Jim Shedd is a 30-year veteran of both state of Florida and federal law enforcement agencies. And after serving in the U.S. Army, Vietnam 69 and 70, he joined the DEA as a special agent in September of 1983 and retired in January 2005. During his 21-year career in the DEA, his assignments included Miami, Dallas, and he was then promoted to supervisory special agent and completed assignments in Bogotá, Colombia, and Detroit, and eventually returned to Miami, where he retired. And since 2005, he is president of SCOBA Investigations and makes numerous television appearances on Spanish television, where he is asked for his opinion on law enforcement matters. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. And to my left, Tom Raffanello, Director of Operations, Malaga Consulting LLC, provides worldwide security and investigative services. Tom was head of the Miami office of the DEA from 1972 to 2004 and retired after 32 years as a DEA agent, managed investigations and operations in Mexico, Colombia, the Caribbean, and traditional organized crime trafficking groups. Thank you for being here, sir.
My pleasure, sir.
So I just want to ask all three of you real quick, individually, what's your opinion of the criminal justice system today?
You want to go in any kind of order?
Go ahead.
I think that being exposed to other criminal justice systems, I think that the United States has the best criminal justice system. But let me preface that by saying that every system, to include criminal justice, is a work in progress. It's a practice. Are we right 100% of the time? No. But nobody's right 100% of the time at anything. And I think compared to anything else I've seen anywhere else in the world, the U.S. has a good system that keeps getting better.
Yeah, because we have a system with a jury by your peers, and it's not just one judge or two judges. Is that like what kind of when you say compared to other countries?
Well, the corruption, I don't say
Okay.
it doesn't exist, but in other places, it's part of the package. And
It's baked into the cake. there.
Absolutely
Yeah.
baked into the cake, as is corruption in police departments, corruption in the attorneys on both sides of the fence. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the United States, but at a much smaller level than advertised.
Right.
Yeah, I think having worked in Latin America quite a bit, one of the problems we always encountered is the corruption of the counterparts that we work with. So we ended up having to vet them, polygraph them, drug test, a number of issues, send them for training in Quantico. And then even when sometimes when you go through all of that, there's still some out of out of 100, maybe one gets through that's not on the up and up, and you end up having to have a problem with that guy. But that is the problem. It's the corruption in Latin America at all levels. And in cases, and we've experienced that in the past with the death and torture and death of Kiki Camarena. It went right to the presidential palace, all the corruption. So it for DEA in the foreign arena, it's a tough area because you have to work with your counterparts. You have to look at them in the eye and say, we're not going to tolerate you doing this when you're working with us.
Right.
You could do it on your own time, but not now. But I agree. We do have the best criminal justice system, I think, that I've testified in courts in Toronto. I've been involved with teaching in Latin America and the Caribbean, and I think we do have the best. It has flaws. It's not perfect. Democracy is not perfect, but it's the best that we got. Comparing it to other countries and other places, where it's really a problem, a severe problem, abuse of power, putting people in jail without bail, without being accused of any formality. It just goes on and on and on. But in this country, you can't do that. You shouldn't be able to do that.
You shouldn't be able to. I mean, some things happen.
I don't know if I can add a lot to that, but I agree with Tom that this is the best country in the world, and I think we do have the best justice system. I think it's a little different here in South Florida, and maybe the system is a little more overloaded here. And, it's a little bit different because we're dealing with people from many, many different countries where other justice systems in different parts of the country don't necessarily deal with. But I think as a whole, we're doing pretty good here.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the ongoing things about particularly Miami is this multicultural community and a lot of the people coming here from Latin American countries, and they are used to that kind of corruption and
Well, not just corruption, but lack of cooperation or want to connect with law enforcement in any way. Like the Haitian community, you have to really be Haitian to understand the culture and how they think about law enforcement and dealing with certain things, crime, criminals, mental illness, things like that. Where voodoo plays a part, and I just think that that's what I'm really talking about, the
Okay.
cultural side of it as well.
right. So one of my big questions to you guys is the war on drugs. You hear it put a lot of ways. You hear it put that it's a war on brown people. You hear people say white people in their neighborhoods use as much or more drugs than the people in the black neighborhoods. Yet it seems that there is an unfair balance. And you guys have all been around the drug.
I've touched on this issue, and here's the problem as I perceive it after 30 years in law enforcement. Law enforcement has done their job. We've locked everybody out. That's our job. Our job is not to make policy. Our job is not to make law. I used to get called quite often to a radio show, a TV show here. And finally I said, I get tired of it. I'm the only one that defends the laws on narcotics, and you have a panel of 3 or 4 people, and none of us at the end of the day make policy or decisions. I said, why don't you invite? And I gave him the name of senators and congressmen. And you know what he said? They won't come. They don't want to talk about it. The problem is all of the weight of solving the drug problem has been put on law enforcement. And it's not. It's treatment, education, rehabilitation,
Yes.
and locking people up. Our drug czar in this country is an empty suit. He just serves no purpose whatsoever. It's a title job with paper functions.
Right.
What he should be doing is looking for the best treatment, education, and rehabilitation, and concentrating on that. That's the problem. In DEA, we don't go after the drug users. We go after the drug distributors,
Drug
the
dealers.
organizations,
Right.
the big guys in their organizations. Dismantle them, seize their property, stop them from distributing drugs.
Right.
The problem for a lot of people is they arrested him. They arrested him for a little bit of drugs. Well, he shouldn't have had it. It's possession of cocaine in the state of Florida is a felony, no matter what amount you have. So if you have cocaine in your pocket and the police stop you for drunken driving or getting into an accident or leaving the scene of an whatever, then what are we supposed to do? Not doing it, not lock you up? But
Yeah, I
But there
agree.
should be something in the system
It-
that if you are an addict and you are looking for a way out, there should be a place to go. There isn't. And that's the reality. There isn't. And the politicians do not want to deal with this problem head on. They want, the law, let the law on drugs is the police problem. But they don't
Jim,
want to deal with
so
it.
I hear you saying that you believe also that the whole drug user aspect is a public health crisis more so than a criminal crisis.
The individual user, yes, but he's contributing overall to the problem. Because
Sure.
that user is buying, look, I have a Cadillac. If people don't like Cadillacs, General Motors wouldn't make Cadillacs. So there is a fundamental problem with the American
Supply and
citizen that he
demand.
needs immediate gratification
Yeah.
on all his problems, whether it's marijuana, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine. I need something to make me feel good. So there's always going to be a supplier. Our job in DEA and law enforcement was to lock up the suppliers. But nobody's taking care, really, of the addict, and the addict causes the problem. We don't do enough in our country for education, treatment, and rehabilitation.
I'm
We're
happy to
leaving
hear you
it to
say that.
individual organizations,
Yeah.
NGOs, but nothing of the level of where the government, and I believe that's the drug czar's job, should be doing.
So
I think that
creating-
goes in hand with mental health and mental health issues too.
Yeah, because it seems that police departments have been made the de facto mental health care providers, and it's not fair. And look,
In certain cases, marijuana has been proven to cause mental health problems. If people have the underlying cause of bipolar or schizophrenia, it brings it out on them.
right.
So, and then they end up in the streets talking to themselves and smoking weed, so.
Right.
So.
And we're teaching kids that it's candy and it's medicine. Not to interrupt,
No, yes,
but-
yes, you did. Go ahead.
but you mentioned that it's a Brown problem. We don't care. I went out for 30 years, I worked with groups that went out on the street. And we didn't sit down and figure out what color violator are we going to go get tonight. Violators identify themselves. Black, brown, white, yellow, orange, all different religions, all different sizes. They identify themselves to us by trafficking in drugs. We enforce law. We don't make law. If there is anything that the drug war did a lot, and I'll tell you what, if DEA agents stayed home for about 30 days, you'd be picking them up in Cadillacs when the drugs really hit the street again. You saw what was going on around here. There's a whole silent undercurrent of why we keep things away from people. I think it's very popular now to attack police. I think it's foolish. There are other ways of doing things. State and local people and the people that make the most noise have the ability to take care of a lot of their local addiction and start these problems. Not everything is the federal government's problem.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Individual responsibility enters into this as well.
So let me ask you a question, Tom. You said you were on these crews that would have dealers present themselves to you. Can you recall one of those events where you had a set up a sting, a bust that you tell us about?
Well, we
that
didn't do
sticks
many
out to you?
stings, but an informant. We recruit informants. Most of the work done by any law enforcement agency in narcotics is done by informants. Informant will come in, and he'll say, there's a guy, John Johnson, is dealing kilogram amounts of cocaine. And we'll try and maybe get a sample of it through the informant or put an undercover agent in to find out just how good the drug is, have some conversations, see what he's capable of dealing. And then we'll set something up where we'll make a deal, he'll go out there and deliver, and we'll take him and any of his co-conspirators down. That's the simplest way I could put a drug deal. That's what we do.
Right.
We don't go to neighborhood meetings and pick people out. They identify themselves to us by selling the narcotics.
Well, what about these like jump out boy crews you hear about that focus on neighborhoods like Overtown or Liberty City that are predominantly black, and they drive in and they come and they do their jump out moves on people on the street corners?
That's a local police issue, but what happens if they don't jump out and arrest the dealer? Then, what does the dealer do? He runs, so they got to chase him through the neighborhood. Oh my God, they're arresting Little John, and all he does is hang out in the corner. Well, Little John in the corner, how it works is that you got shot callers, you have shorties, you have the guy whose job is to protect the weapon, you have a guy whose job is to protect the drugs, you have a guy who's supposed to take the money. So it's a well-oiled, organized machine, and you have to be able to surprise them, to be able to get all of them at the same time. Because they're all kids. Most of them are just 13, 14, 15, 16. And one of the things that's happening is that they went to elementary school together. They know each other. So now they're in junior high or in high school, 10th grade. But now they live 2 blocks apart. So the 18th Street guys, they belong to the 18th Street gang. The 16th grade, they belong to another gang. Even though they were friends in childhood, but now narcotics distribution has put them as enemies, so they see each other and they shoot each other. That's what's happening in the streets in Liberty City. Guys that knew each other, probably played as little boys, are now enemies because they live a couple of blocks away and they belong to different gangs. And that gang is distributing drugs and guns, and now there's a competition.
So now these guys don't have the resources and means to be organizing big shipments of drugs. So
no, but
where
it's
does
brought
that
into their neighborhood.
But can you tell me who you have found in your years of service is behind bringing these drugs into these neighborhoods to put into the hands of the 18th Street and the 16th Street?
Usually, those are neighborhoods that deal with their own ethnic background people. Somebody eventually in that neighborhood is able to travel to somewhere outside of that 4 or 5 square block area, and he's the guy that distributes to those people. It takes time. You have to, if you want to. It's very difficult to get to that guy because the shorties or the shot callers, they don't turn on him. So you have to be able to build a case through confiscating their phones, trying to set up, eventually get a wiretap going on that guy so you can get him to distribute. That takes time and effort, and a lot of work to be able to get to that guy. And then that guy's not as important. It's the guy who brings it to him that's important. And so on up the chain. When I was in DEA, we did a wire. We did a wire and intercept. We started with one guy, and that guy led us to another and another and another and another. And we eventually ended up arresting 2 Haitian Americans who were bringing it on those boats that go to Miami River. And when we had him on a wire, we arrested him, and the judge let him out on bail, and he promptly took off and went back to Haiti.
Yeah.
So, then we have that problem of judges saying, well, like one judge said in one of our cases that I worked with, Dave Bolton, well, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. He had committed an armed robbery, did another armed robbery, and the judge said, yeah, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Well, yeah, he fled. Yeah. One robbery wasn't enough. Second robbery wasn't enough, and a judge let him out. Oh, well, put an ankle bracelet on. I'm like, that's really going to stop the guy. That judge ended up retiring, by the way.
Yeah.
He cut the bracelet off. He went out and committed another series of felonies to include robberies.
That we know of.
Yeah,
that we know of.
Homicides.
Let me just go back to the jump out crew. That's where the real violence is.
Yeah.
That's where these young kids are getting shot. How are you going to get in there if you don't do what the police are doing? Do you think you're going to get turned in by anybody? Stools get shot. They discourage people from talking to the police. We're the enemy.
Snitches get stitches.
Right.
We're the enemy.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with it? Do you just let them kill each other, a la Chicago, Opelika?
And there are neighbors in that neighborhood who feel threatened by these gangs, who constantly call the police and say, you need to do something. And then when the police does something and it turns bad because the kid had a 9mm or down the street there was a guy with an AK-47, then of course, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
It's the police did the wrong thing.
It's a dangerous business.
No question. It's
No
a dangerous
doubt about
business.
it.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I think a lot of these different violent things have been happening on both sides for years. I do think there is definitely a new level of, I want to call it, I guess, a lack of respect for law enforcement
For human life.
What do you think that
and
is?
for human life.
What do you think that is?
Why do I think it is?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a lot of levels of different things. I think education is a big part of it. I think social status is a big part of it. I think media is a big part of it, and I think just general community relations are a big part of it. And yeah, drugs are a big part of it. And yeah, guns are a big part of it.
And they go together.
They
They
seem
fight
to.
over turf. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been on the front line,
I'm
so
ju-
why do you
yeah.
think it is?
Well, I mean, I think we explained it. They fight over turf.
Turf.
Like Jim said, you work your way up.
Yeah.
The dope on the street could be 7 times removed from the guy that's bringing it
Exactly.
in. So you got to go up the steps. But our first and the police's first responsibility is to protect the life at the bottom end. And that's why they use an unusual method in unusual times. There was a time, believe it or not, where if people saw something and something happened in their neighborhood, people would call up and tell the police. Not anymore. That's in Chicago, if you tell the police, your kids will get shot. If you do it in Opelika, they get stitches. You know, it starts at the top. We have politicians that have made it a ping pong ball.
But I
Both
think
national
also
and
police
local.
have become more reactive instead of proactive, and I
Yeah.
think that's because of the economy and because of the things that are happening with the media today. And I think we're starting to see the repercussions because of that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's a definitely
No,
a
yeah.
complicated. It's a complicated situation.
Look,
And I don't
I'll
agree
tell you
with these
another-
guys.
And I realize this more so than I'm in the private sector. The state judicial system in Dade County
Screwed.
is broken. It's broken.
That's what
It's
we're all about
broken
here.
beyond repair.
How is it broken?
The Dade County State Attorney's Office is a mess. Those guys barely graduate out of law school, and they're there for 2 or 3 years, maybe that long, and they leave. Pay is terrible. Working conditions is terrible. The local jails are packed. They don't have it. There's not enough money to build new jails. There's not enough money to build a new court system. It is awful, just terrible.
Why is it
Awful.
Why is it like that? Is it like
Because-
that because of the
Well, it's
laws that were made?
No.
Look, you guys were law enforcement.
No.
You're enforcing the laws, but
it's a matter of distribution of assets. And our politicians that we've elected, our state legislatures, our governors, just say that they don't have the money. Now,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
collect taxes. I pay a lot of taxes on my house. I pay a lot of taxes when I buy anything, and yet there's no money. I mean, a prosecutor here is making, what, $35,000? 35, 40,000. You think that person goes to law school to make a career of a prosecutor in the state attorney's office? No. They go there to learn. They go there because maybe they can't find another job. They handle everything. Everything is a plea. Very rarely do they go to trial. It is overwhelming.
have
It's
you ever
broken.
have you ever had prosecutors ask you to lie on the stand?
No, never.
No?
Never.
Have you ever had anybody try to bribe you for
No.
something on the stand?
Never.
You mean a criminal?
Either one, yeah.
Sure, I've had a criminal offer behind the back bribes. Absolutely. Right at the scene. We don't have to tell anybody you're here. You make that money go away and I won't say anything. But they train us, and I train myself from the beginning. When I look at money, and I've seen tens of millions of dollars. When I look at it, to me, it's monopoly money.
It happens. Some guys fall by the wayside and they end up going to jail and losing their career.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I've been in a room where there was millions of dollars. I was doing some work in Dallas, and guys were coming and going, and then we were going to buy, I forgot how many kilos of heroin from some people out of Louisiana, and all of a sudden I look around and I had $4 million. I was the only one in the room with $4 million. Close to Love Field. I could have gone to Love Field, rented a plane, and disappeared. And then what?
In that.
Yeah. You sleep with one eye open for the rest of your life.
$4 million ain't going to carry you that far
First of
anymore.
all, it's not within my nature to do that. I've never had anybody offer me anything. Never.
No?
Never. I never had a prosecutor tell me to lie. I've never had a defense attorney tell me to lie.
No.
It's never happened.
Yeah, it makes for good TV, but it doesn't happen that often.
Well, I imagine, I imagine people must fudge things one way or another. Let's say you got a scumbag that's sitting up there and you just need to, maybe I need to play it up a little bit.
You know what?
Worth it.
If I can't prove it, I'll walk away.
Okay.
What's the point? You're bastardizing a system that you're tied to for your entire life.
Yeah.
You're jeopardizing your personal reputation, your professional, your family's reputation. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It happens.
But there
Some
must be
guys that do
cops
that and
out
they get
there.
caught.
There must be cops out there that
But then
do it, right?
sooner or later it'll come out. Eventually it comes out.
Right.
And then you
They just don't do it one time.
And then, then you
it's
lose your
about
job.
behavior.
Or you could get prosecuted. It's not worth it.
Can you
No.
guys tell me one time in your careers that you've had an operation and something went horribly wrong? And an investigation, give me a story about something going horribly wrong in one of your...
Sure. I know Jim can too. I remember we sent a guy undercover into a restaurant not too far from here in Miami Gardens. And as we were rehearsing, in those days the phones were about 1.5 feet tall.
The whole
brick.
Motorola brick.
You remember those?
Yeah.
And we worked out a panic signal. If something happened, press the button on the phone, and if I get on and say, "Are you okay?" and you say C, or if you say C, we're coming in. If there's nothing and you say Joey or you say something else, we're going to let this thing go. So we had a guy undercover, and he presses the button. I said, "You're in trouble, huh?" And he said, "C." So we went in there. We had a couple of machines. When we got in there, he was sitting in a booth, and the crook had a gun in his mouth. And right before we went in there, one of the crooks pulled a Cadillac to the back of the restaurant and emptied the trunk. So they were going to off him and put him in the trunk. Now, it wasn't so much that they made him, it's just that they thought that the money was coming and they were going to rip it off. But this wasn't that unusual for Miami. These things happened here, and I'm not even going to count the shootouts that happened in those days.
I almost got shot by one of my guys. The round
Probably
came about this
deservedly
far.
so.
If I hadn't stepped forward just as I heard them fighting at the door, and I stepped forward, and the round came right behind my back. I still have the bullet. I mean, if I would have stayed in place at that, but and there were other times I was doing undercover in Dallas too. It was no ethnic. We started off and we ended up with a whole crew of good old boys who were moving major quantity of coke in Dallas. And unbeknownst to me, surveillance did their job, and when I gave the signal for the arrest and everybody started moving, a car with 4 good old boys armed to the teeth was coming for me. And then they blocked them off. But I mean, that happens. That's the job. That's the nature of the job.
That's the cost of doing
That's the
business.
cost of doing business. It didn't stop me from doing undercover work, but it made me more careful. But it can happen. Things
think
can go
that's-
wrong real fast.
Like Jim said, that's part of the business. You've got to roll with the punches.
You got a story?
I've got a couple of them.
Let's hear one, yeah.
I remember going to Mexico a couple of years ago to do something against one of the cruise lines. And we were able to get into the port through some contacts that we had, and we started to do some measurements, and all of a sudden things changed there, and they're like, "No, you guys got to go. You got to leave the port." And so, we were disappointed, and we said, "Okay," we left. We ended up getting a hotel right next to the port. Before the sun rose the next day, and I kind of laugh about this, I went with the team that I was with, and we dove into the water. We snorkeled. Before the sun rose, we swam into the port. As the sun rose, we were able to finish our measurements, take our pictures, do the testing of the soil there. And, of course, it was kind of dangerous because the ships were coming in, the security was there, and we left without being discovered, and that was a big one for my client. I've had other situations in other countries where, maybe physical altercations happened and, you were there to do things and things went bad, but I think that's, as I said, it's part of the job. Your job is to make the impossible possible. And there's a lot of pressure on you, especially when you're working for someone, you're going out of the country, you have a limited time window, your resources are limited, and they're expected to produce. So I think that's just, something that you get used to doing is producing.
Let me go back a little bit when you talked about the system. I have nothing but respect for professional prosecutors and a lot of the state people, but Jim hit the nail on the head. For the money they pay them, they go in there, they get it on their resume, and they move on. And they make real money staring out the window and doing civil cases. But somebody that escaped this to this point, and I don't think they should, are the judges, especially the elected judges. It's all about identity politics when it comes to judges. They have 4 or 5 different names, so they make sure they touch every ethnicity that's out there. And I haven't been impressed with them in a long time. They pontificate, they take their sweet time, and they need to, I don't think judges should be elected, and I think judges should be reviewed regularly. They're a big part of the problem.
Yeah, you just saw out in California, there was one of the elected judges because of his
Stanford University
his light
case.
sentencing. People rose up and unseated him, and they run every 6 years. The problem I see with electing judges is this. It occurs to me that the electorate is not that well educated in these communities that we live in. People just don't seem to have real information, and they may go ahead and elect a judge based on the name or some kind of
90%
affiliation. I'm
of the
going to
time.
pick the woman, or I'm going to pick the guy with the Jewish last name, or I'm going to pick the guy with the Latin last name.
I agree with
It's got nothing to do with what they actually know, because, the truth of the matter is there's just not a lot of education about civics, and
But-
particularly criminal justice gets even deeper because it's even more confusing.
I speak from experience. The average American voter, basically almost to the border of being ignorant. They do no research. They vote based on if he's African American, he's got the African American vote. If he's Cuban, they got the Cuban vote. And I'm telling you because I ran for office, and they come up to me, right up to me, and say, I like you, but I'm not going to vote for you because you're not fill in the blank.
Also, ballots have
And
gotten so large,
and
it's
when
hard to decipher what is going on.
Well,
what
they
is
don't
You got to
take
do some homework.
They don't want to do the homework. If you on the municipal elections, you look at the results at the end of the day. Let's say 100% of the people vote for the mayor. Less people vote for the vice mayor. Less people vote for their councilman. They walk away. They think, I'll vote for the president. He'll solve everything. I'll vote for the mayor. He'll solve everything. And this is a participatory democracy. If you have a city council and you have 5 members, it's 5 equal votes. It's not a dictatorship. And yet people go, well, I don't like the mayor anymore. He doesn't get anything done. Yeah, but did you vote for people who are going to help him? Did you even know that you had, they don't complete. They live in District 1, for example. They'll vote for the mayor. District 1, the heck with the rest.
Yeah.
And then, the other people, they don't read and understand and look at the candidates and study the candidates. Just because you have a law degree doesn't mean you're qualified to be a judge if you have no experience.
No doubt. And Tom and I were talking about this before the show started, that men seem to have a lot of times we can learn from our wisdom as we get older. Maybe a little more patience, a little more time to think things through than when we're younger. And I think that's true for everything across the board. And when you're relying on judges to be the arbiters of all these things, especially in today's world, it seems like everything is falling to the judiciary because politics is out of control. Criminal justice is overloaded and overwhelmed. And so we're relying on the judiciary. But, one of our producers was just gathering some statistics for us when we were having the conversation about police and law enforcement. And listen, you guys, nothing but respect. Law enforcement officers enforce the law.
Correct.
Okay, and you guys, that's what you did. The laws for the drugs are these, and this is what you need to go out. But statistically, police search black and Latin people twice as much as white people. But a lot of times, white people actually have more contraband on them than do the black and Latin people, statistically. Canadian police are trained in de-escalating, and the U.S. police are trained in weapons. San Francisco, the data shows that black drivers are 8 times more likely to be searched than white drivers. New York City, 91% of all people who were stopped and frisked by the police department were more likely to be black or Latino. Why don't we search the Wall Street guys for coke? How come nobody's patting down bankers when they're coming out of the bank?
You can take statistics and make them reflect anything you want them to say.
They're not patting people down for drugs. They're
Patting
patting
them
people
down
for
for
weapons.
Weapons.
So,
Yeah.
what are your chances that in a really bad neighborhood where you have gangs going on,
Known gang
and
activity.
what are your chances that you have a Wall Street guy, whatever color of his skin is? I've been to Wall Street. There's all colors and genders. What are the chances that that guy's packing a stolen 9mm compared to a guy that you know is a gang member?
Yeah.
I mean, you can twist the figures any way you want. I know there's a big thing now. There's a big movement among our society. Oh, woe with that little boy, that little girl. The police mistreated her. And now, for example, what happened in New Jersey? Everybody started filming when the cops were fighting with the woman. Oh, everybody was up. Look at him. He's trying to hit her. He's trying to. But the cops, fortunately, were wearing cameras. So nobody taped. Nobody paid attention of the encounter prior when they were trying to deal with this woman on a civilized basis, and she wasn't complying, and she wasn't moving, and she was cursing at him, she was walking away from him, and then they had to tackle her and throw her on the ground. She was still fighting. Yeah. I think there is something out here in the public that they think that they have the right to challenge a law enforcement officer when that law enforcement officer approaches him, and that is the wrong approach. When I get stopped on traffic, in a traffic stop at night, what do? I pull off the road. I turn on all the lights in my inside, and I lower the windows, and I turn off the car, and I keep my hands on the wheel. What does a belligerent, uncooperative person do? None of the above.
None of the above.
They keep the window, or they'll roll down the window a little bit and go, "What the F do you want?
Absolutely.
What did
Really?
you F stop me for? You don't have the right." Now, I was a police officer before. You know what happens at that point? You want to pull that person right out the window.
For
right
sure.
out that little crack. What happens when they pull up to me? I'm not a threat. They don't know who they're stopping. I am not a threat. They can see clearly into my car. They see it, and even in the day, I lower all the windows, turn off the car. I cooperate to lessen the stress on that police officer who's approaching the individual.
Sure.
I got stopped. I came back from Bogotá on Tuesday night. As I'm coming back, I looked at the CBP, and I saw a female looking at me. I looked right at her, and I knew she was going to stop me. I knew it. And I told her, I said, "I knew you were looking at me." "Well, how did you know?" "Because I have 30 years of experience. I saw you before you saw me." But what did I get, belligerent on her? If you're going to get belligerent with a law enforcement officer, you're not going to win.
Did you get a ticket?
And you have
Did you get a ticket?
No. She let me. It's just CBP. I was coming out. I was done already. But confrontation is not the way to go.
I agree. And I think one of the big problems in the world, in this world that we live in today, is that there's this kind of suspended reality with all this social media, and it's not real-time interaction. And you have somebody that wants to videotape the cop, but you didn't, as you said, see the 10 minutes before or the 10 minutes after. And all you're seeing is that one little excerpt, which is not real-time.
Well,
and it's not reality.
That died down with the woman in New Jersey on the beach.
Yeah.
All of
I
a
saw
sudden
the
now,
whole tape.
nobody was taping from before.
Sure.
Only when she was on the ground fighting.
I mean, but
And I think we came from a generation where you were taught to respect the police, you were taught to respect the firemen, and even if you had a problem with that particular officer, you respected the uniform that they were wearing.
I agree. But,
And times have changed, and you know what? That's an interesting point that Jim brings out. And I do a lot of background checks, and if I look at the background and I see, man, this guy got 5 tickets on one day, that kind of tells me something.
Yeah.
You know, those are called attitude adjusters. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
that's why when you look at a background, there's a lot of things, if you have experience, that you can take out of that, where other people, you know, just may say, oh, the guy's got a lot of tickets and that's it. But there's things that, you know, you can look at in people's background and see, and that's a good point there, Jim.
It
curious,
becomes
'cause-
the police officer, you're yelling at him, he's writing tickets. You're
Oh, for
yelling?
sure, yeah. No,
Okay.
and we do. I think I certainly come from that generation that you respect the police. Look, and I'm a white dude, and I
Doesn't
know
mean
that
you're
you
a
put
bad
that-
person.
Thank you. But I know that I put my hands on the steering wheel also.
Sure.
I do.
Yes,
I do.
I mean, that's just something that
Because
Hello?
that police officer.
you want to make them
And
feel
when
comfortable.
I hear those
police
statistics
officer-
about black and white, they don't make a lot of sense to me because most of my clients that are in federal prison, they're white guys. And they were big-time drug dealers, and I'm not a believer in life sentences for nonviolent criminals, which we probably disagree on that. But
Do we disagree on that? Nonviolent criminals, life sentences?
Depends on what the nonviolent crime is.
Okay.
So suppose somebody molests a child.
Oh, well, okay.
Is that a violent crime?
nonviolent drug crime.
offense. That's I'm sorry.
Nonviolent drug crime.
There's no such
somebody
thing
molesting a child, yes, that is
as a
violent.
nonviolent
It is
drug.
violent. Molesting a
Yeah,
child
but
is violent.
that's look. When a person goes to jail for a life sentence
Yes.
for drugs, do you know how much drugs that we've tacked onto that person?
Yeah,
And then-
I mean,
and
I had
then-
a lady here
but-
that got the life in prison for 5 ounces of crack cocaine. She was on the
Well,
show, Gloria Taylor. And look,
How many times was
Kanye
she
West's old
arrested?
lady just went to the White House and got this one lady off from a sentence. You know how many people are in jail for that low amount of drug for
or just
life?
marijuana.
Yeah.
Bell Gardens Bicycle Club,
Yeah.
Randy Lanier, Ben Kramer, Eugene Fisher.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were bringing
Just
in
career
criminals
metric
doing
tons
tons of
marijuana.
dope.
But that was
Metric
marijuana.
tons.
So what?
So
It's
what?
not medicine.
I know, but I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished for their crime, but 20 years,
But they
25,
brought
30
in
years.
metric
I think there
tons
should be.
of marijuana, and
Yeah.
the law
Boy, I don't
said
see
if
it
you
anywhere
bring in a
close to
certain
that.
amount, you're going to
We
go
just-
to jail for life.
We
They
just-
knew it, and they brought it in.
Spent
and
the money.
it
They spent the money.
Absolutely. Now, so wait.
And they live
If the-
well.
Now, if the laws change, because you guys are career drug enforcement agents, and if the laws change next week and marijuana's legal, because I just heard you say it's not candy, it's not medicine, but for some people it is medicine.
But you know what? I don't buy a lot of that crap. I think that eventually, with all this stuff is going on, the people in Colorado in 10 years are going to turn around and say, what happened to the kids? We got a problem here. There's a lot of problems. You teach children 10, 11, 12 years old that marijuana is candy, and you're going to have a problem. And I guarantee it.
I think that the culture dictates the law, and culture is changing in America. Despite what Tom and I, and perhaps Dave, he's a little bit of a leftist guy. So on certain things, but despite what we think from our experience, that's not going to affect the outcome of what the culture is turning to. I think, and Tom thinks, I think it's unstoppable. I think it's going to change. But I think who knows what the repercussions are going to be. Already studies are indicating high levels of schizophrenia, bipolar. If you look at that guy at 30 years old and his parents had to take him to court to get him out of their house, does he look to you like he had a 9-to-5 job?
I think that's way deeper than smoking weed, my friend.
Smoking weed,
But also-
smoking weed on a daily basis is not conducive to running a good life. I think
Doing
That's-
any mind-altering
that's where
drug
it's
is
gonna end
not
up.
good on a daily basis. But look at the alcohol business. You can't tell me that alcohol has not killed and caused so much.
And look at
hurt
the
in
problems
this
we
world.
have because of the
Sugar.
legalization of cannabis.
Sugar,
So-
the next tobacco. Tobacco. Okay,
All
we can
do-
make a list.
all we-
Anything that
all
can
we
be
could do-
abused.
He is a
all-
liberal.
Tom,
But
yeah, he is.
but you know
Tom
what?
and Tom and I could do is like in the dark somewhere saying, beware, culture, of what you're doing.
That's it.
Well,
Beware,
and I don't
because
agree with
you're
them,
not
but
gonna
I see
listen.
the point, and I also think that marijuana isn't what it was when we were growing up
That's
as
for
kids
sure.
either.
It's much
and
stronger.
Who,
Oh,
and
yeah.
who knows where it's going to be in 20 years from now? And these aren't things that are, really a natural plant anymore. It's something that's been manipulated. It's been
Genetically
condensed.
modified.
And like they're saying, what are the repercussions of that in the future? It's not like coffee. It's not like tobacco.
It's an interesting point that you make because you hear everybody bitching about genetically modified food, but they aren't bitching about genetically modified weed.
Right.
They're like, hey, let's get
Yeah,
the genetically
THC
modification
content
going.
is 33,
And off the
35,
chart.
36%.
Another friend of ours told me years ago, decades ago, he said, you know what? We're probably going to see repercussions in the future when kids are being born of parents who were hardcore drug users, cocaine, heroin, crack, and maybe it's changed their personalities. And maybe that's a lot of what we're seeing
I
today.
don't care if an adult wants to smoke a hamster, but if you're teaching kids that this is good behavior, you're making a terrible mistake.
But is that what people are teaching, or is that culturally? You think is that the advertisement? Is that like the
Wine on the
television for
table.
children? Television for children is all about toys and sugar.
Why are
television
10-year-olds
for adults is
smoking
all
pot?
about cars and alcohol?
Then why are 10-year-olds smoking pot? How are they getting it?
Why are they drinking wine at the table?
Yeah, but you know what? There are many more pot smokers at 10 than there are alcoholics. I'd make you a side bet on
I
it.
think it's human nature to it's human nature to do things. Look, I used to say I used to say, if here in America we would say, if you take a plain paper napkin and you bake it till it toast, and then you cut it up into little pieces and you snort it, A, it will cause brain damage, but B, it'll get you high. We would be the napkin police.
Okay.
We would be the napkin police.
I got you.
Because if I've been to the laboratories, the so-called laboratories. I've been to them in Colombia. I've been to the coca paste fields and to the cocaine hydrochloride labs. And people think that it's some guy in a Roche laboratory with goggles. It's barefoot campesinos stepping on kerosene, concrete, recycled potassium permanganate.
Rodent feces.
It's cancer. It's cancer at its best. And yet, you tell people this. Listen, if you keep doing this, you're going to get a tachycardia and you're going to die. And or there could be severe consequences because of all the carcinogens you're taking. And they're going to go, where do I snort this good stuff?
Okay,
So,
but now here's my question.
And they're having children.
Now here's my
they're having
question.
children.
Do you really think that these people made these laws because somebody snorting the napkins is causing them to have brain damage and, we feel bad that they're hurting themselves? Or do you think it's because those napkins are costing us billions and billions of dollars in cash flowing out of this country every year?
That's a good question. I don't think that there's any morality to a lot of congressmen and senators. They don't do anything on a moral basis. We've lost that a long time ago. It's all about the bottom line and who pays them and what PAC controls their election and who gives them money. So fortunately, Will Rogers said it best. We have the best Congress that money can buy. He said it then, and it's even more effective now. I mean, the money that flows in, what is it? I think there's like 5 or 6 pharma people for every member of Congress. There's only 535 members of Congress, and there's thousands of people working for the pharmaceutical industry controlling legal narcotics and legal drugs. So,
Term limits.
yeah. It's just,
Maybe.
they get there and then,
to start.
they make decisions based on what's the polling say, rather than what's right and what's morally correct. What's the polling say? Well, that every politician gets elected, he thinks about already. As soon as he gets elected,
Next
the next
election.
election. And I know a couple of congressmen. If you go out here to Miami International Airport, you'll see them leaving on a Monday and Tuesday, back to Washington, and coming back on a Thursday or Friday. Because they have to come back to the district to keep that money flowing. Keep the money flowing. They don't spend time with other congressmen in Washington. They don't socialize. Their families are here. And all they think about is, what's the most important thing? I got to get elected. I need $2-3 million in the bank because if somebody challenges me, I might lose my job. They don't make decisions. They haven't done anything on a moral thing. They haven't done anything for addicts.
So,
When have they done anything for an addict that wants to get off drugs?
Right, and I want to just punctuate Tom's comment about that there's more weed smokers and alcoholics than weed smokers. Listen, addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter what the substance is.
Right.
Yeah.
And addiction is definitely a public health
Absolutely.
issue. It is not a criminal issue. When it comes to the enforcement of the laws about drugs,
That's the police's job. Law enforcement
that's
job.
what it is. And it's up to
There's very
like
little.
it was
there's
like
very
David was
little-
saying, it's up to the people to say, hey, do we want to change this or not?
There's been what I would call very little phase 2. We lock them up, and then that's it. We lock up the dealers, the local, at the street level, law enforcement locks up the users, and then that's it. There's no follow-up. Very few, there's a drug court. If you go here, you go there, you go to boot camp. But really, no long treatment and rehabilitation. And some of these people need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times to get out. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
there is, and I agree with Tom. There's a certain amount of individual responsibility. But when you are poor and you have nothing, and you're at the street level, and your most important thing is your next heroin shot, and he has no insurance and nowhere to go, he or she, that's a problem.
Yeah. They've
That's
never
a
had a
problem.
mentor or somebody to guide them.
No, they have
their
nowhere to
parents
go.
are living the
They
same
can't just
lifestyle.
go somewhere and say,
Or
you know what,
education, yeah.
I've had it, I need help. Where do they go?
But unless they commit a violent crime, and unless they commit a violent crime,
They're not
I
going
mean,
for any period of time to prison.
they're not going for any long period of time. You know, the myth that prisons are filled with drug users is a myth.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing:
a myth.
the prisons. What Jim said is right. That there's no phase 2 or phase 3. It's a system of. It appears to be a system of catch them and punish them.
Yeah.
And not teach them and rehabilitate them. Because and the
And
bottom
hence,
line is
and
this.
hence that's where it falls on everybody. Oh, the war on drugs is a failure. The police, but the police have done their job.
Correct.
If you lived here in the '80s, if it wasn't for the state, federal, and local police being out here running and gunning and kicking butt, if you didn't live here at the time, you don't know what was going on.
Oh, it was no. I was living
Homicides,
here.
drug dealing.
It was out
you
of
had,
control. Yeah.
You know, it was out of control.
It was out of control.
And we cleaned that. We were successful in cleaning this place.
Drove them from South Florida, essentially.
But also, I think that was a different
Really, you
generation.
don't think that they're still
Not to the level
Not
they
to the
were.
level they were then.
no?
No.
Absolutely
That
not.
was the
I
different
would-
generation of law enforcement, though, too. I think the police officers today, they're, as I said, they're more reactive.
Yeah, and you know it goes back to the thing
community
about
policing and things,
right.
the basics
it does.
of that.
And they're hiring a lot of young dudes, and we were saying this earlier. Maturity goes a long way. On our previous program, Detective Ramesh
Nyberg.
thank you. He made that point very clearly that there's the community policing aspect, like you're saying, David, is not there. It's quick, reactive, jump out, get aggressive, and I think a lot of that has to do with youth because Detective Nyberg, you know, he did have that kind of maturity about him, and he even admitted about his own behavior in his youth. Now, you guys both started in the DEA when you were super young.
No. I was much older.
How old?
I was in customs in my 20s.
Right. I didn't get onto DEA till my 30s.
Well, that's okay. That's young when you're over 50.
Well, I wasn't young.
And in 70s.
Very few people, and I can tell you that because I was in charge of recruiting for a while here. Very few. DEA doesn't hire brand new kids out of college. There's an exception to the
Mostly-
rule. You must have a great talent, like you speak several languages,
Okay.
or you're a pilot, or you're a lawyer, or you have a CPA. You know, but most of the guys have already
Prior police.
life experience. We wanted people with life experience, ex police officers. You know, whether you were in banking, that helped if you were banking. I mean, I can think of Alex Dominguez, for example. Very rarely did you get hired at 22. It does.
For the DEA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were looking for more.
Even the
experience.
FBI, same thing.
More mature.
Yeah, more mature, more
With a
experienced.
specialty,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Somebody that knows what they're getting
Now the
into.
police department, they can't afford that. They got people coming in at I don't know what the minimum age is,
Yeah.
but if you have 2 years of college and you're 20 or 21, and it helps, I think, if you have military too when you start your career. That brings you a little more
Yeah.
maturity to it.
So, all in all, when it comes to you guys, movies and book deals, when they're coming out,
I don't have any.
really,
No.
I find that hard to believe.
No.
Come
No,
on.
no, I don't. Dave does, but not us.
Dave,
Dave is working on
what's
his
the movie and the book deal?
You know, Miami's biggest import and export is gold the last few years. And I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. There's the largest precious metal refinery in the U.S. is here in Miami. And I've had the pleasure of working with them and clients of theirs and been involved in a lot of high-end thefts and robberies that relate to the precious metal industry. And a few years ago, in 2012, there was a very large robbery that we all participated in, and that turned into a case that's actually still going on today in the federal system. It involves not only the stealing of almost $3 million of gold, but the murder of an FBI informant, the kidnapping of a member of the Zetas drug cartel, which was turned over to the DEA, smuggling of baseball players out of Cuba.
Home invasions.
Home invasions.
They invaded the wrong house.
So did you guys meet on that case? Is that where the three of you met?
No, we
met
knew
for-
each other before then. I also have an agent. I was the chief investigator on the Manuel Noriega case back in the early 90s, and there are some people interested in doing a book and a series on that. So you might see more of us.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. So this gold heist, it was the largest gold heist in the
state
history
of Florida.
in the history
The
of the
largest
state of Florida?
robbery in Coral Gables history. And we were successful in determining who was involved.
You guys found them.
Yes. And
How'd you do that?
just through a lot of contacts, a lot of homework, just having some luck with rewards that we were offering. And
Persistence.
yes, people being comfortable and coming to us and trusting us based on our reputations. And that turned into something pretty interesting.
Yeah, on the guy that fled, the guy that we were concentrating on, he fled.
Yeah.
Like the judge let him out. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I still remember his words. Anyway, he fled. We confronted him. I think Tom and Dave found him somewhere. And
Found
we
him
were
at his girlfriend's
Trying to, anyway, so he left the country. So we were trying to figure out what to do. And Dave came up with the idea of doing a wanted poster with a reward. And lo and behold, the guy is entering Belize from Guatemala. And an immigration guy at Belize, on a hunch, runs him on Google. And he finds the poster that we had made up, saying reward for information. So the guy calls and says, I got this guy here. And then we went to battle. Really,
Let me stop you there for 1 second, if you don't mind, Jim. But before that, we had information that he was in the Bahamas. We were hours behind him at certain times when he was on a boat in the Bahamas. We had people looking for him in Cuba. We were looking for him in Mexico prior to this in different
And I
locations.
told Dave, I said, you know what, someday, somewhere, he'll get stopped by a Montana trooper or somebody will stop him. That's how we're going to find him. And sure enough, anyway, so the guy stops him, calls Dave, goes, yeah, Dave, hold on. And then we contacted friends of ours that we had at the marshal's office. And to their credit, the marshal's office did everything they could
were amazing.
to go get this guy. But CBP would not give him the authority, the permission to go get him. And that went on for about 4 or 6 weeks. They said, no. Marshals said, look, we'll go, we'll bring him. No. We'll put him on a plane to go to Cuba, and then when he's in transit here, we'll go get him. CBP said, we won't let you into the airport. The U.S. Marshals. We won't let you arrest him. It went on and on and on. And
Why
on.
would they do that?
Good question.
They were assets of...
So we believe it was because they were probably could have been working for, he could have been working for a Homeland Security agency. We'll just leave it at that. We don't know.
So he
My
was
guess.
he was an informant
We don't know.
at a higher level.
I don't know. We don't know. There's
Okay.
there's
worked
no
with-
logical reason for what the CBP was doing.
And
So
they
we're-
had worked with the DEA before.
So we were, well, not directly him, a couple other guys, but then we were throwing ideas out, and I said, look, the only thing we could do is embarrass them publicly, just bring it out what they're doing.
And the guys in Belize were saying, we're going to have to let him go.
Yeah,
The
so
clock
we
is
were.
ticking.
So we said we need to go to a national newspaper, New York Times, Washington Post, and Dave says maybe USA Today. So Dave knows somebody or contacted somebody at USA Today. We told him our story, and he called them. The reporter called them on Friday afternoon.
CBP.
Called CBP and said, what do you have to say about this matter? I'm going with this story. You know, USA has that Saturday paper. They don't have a Sunday
It's a
paper.
weekend edition.
What does CBP stand for?
Customs and Border Patrol. Because you need their permission to bring the body in, because he didn't have
Wasn't a U.S. citizen.
he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was a Cuban citizen. So lo and behold,
Cuba didn't even want him. They refused to take him.
So lo and behold, he calls him Friday afternoon, says, I got this story, I got this, what do you have to say? Why aren't you letting him in?
The front page of USA Today.
And it's going to go on the
Wow.
front page of USA Today. That was like at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock or something like that, 7:30. The marshal's office gets here in Miami, gets a letter saying, okay, you can go get him. And their response to the reporter was, oh, no. We weren't blocking this.
We never said no.
We
It
were,
was in the
we were
works.
debating it. We were thinking, we were doing, but it's okay now. So if we had not done that, this Raffanello Valdez, right? That's his name, would have never been brought back to face what he did, the home invasion, the death of an individual that he robbed. He would have never faced charges in the U.S.
How did they get this gold out of? Where was the gold? Was it in a vault? Was it?
No, what happens is, and the industry has changed a lot in the last 15 years because of security concerns and also for compliance issues. I've worked other cases out of the country where gold was stolen. 5 minutes, Jen. Where gold was stolen, and I've been very successful in this field, and I've kind of acquired this niche, as I have with other things, such as accident investigations against the cruise lines. But basically, there was a courier that was bringing the gold here from Bolivia, and to export gold out of most countries, it has to be below a certain percentage, below 80% purity. So this gold was in the form of what looked like popcorn. It was 110 pounds of gold. At that time, people were bringing gold on the aircraft here. Usually it was in the...
It was declared. It was all legal.
Right, all legal.
okay.
It was on the in the carry-on bags, or sometimes, depending if it was bars, it would be put underneath the plane. And when they come here to Miami, they report it. They have all the paperwork of where it came from and everything, and they'll take it here to the refinery to be refined. They get a check sent back to them in whatever country they're in. And they usually they're not the owners, they're just the couriers, and they take a small percentage of doing that. They would go in their country to different places and pick up from pawn shops or whatever gold and pay for it there, making
Okay.
a small percentage, and then making a percentage on the transportation here. And that was the case in this robbery, where they weren't the actual owners of the gold; they were just the transportation company. But they had been doing this for 40 years and never had an issue like
The
this
thieves
before.
got rid of it, and we know that because with his GPS, we followed him through his GPS. He went to different pawn shops, and that was where
That's
it was
how they-
unloaded, and jewelry shops.
A little bit at a time.
But these
Little
were
bit of
very unusual criminals. They were very sophisticated.
Dangerous.
They worked together as like a military
Killers.
unit.
Oh, really?
10 days prior
yeah.
to this, they did a home invasion where they were going to rob a drug house up in Miramar, and their buddy was shot. He was the first one in the door. He was shot and dropped right there, paralyzed.
They hit the wrong house.
They left him. 10 days later, they did this. They killed an FBI informant in Mexico. They were smuggling baseball players out of Cuba
Yeah, they
into
were
Mexico, holding
serious
them.
Full
gang.
service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you can think of, these guys pretty much were in it.
And by the way, we should add the caveat. Dave and I, went to ICE, met with ICE agents, and said, these guys are dangerous. You have to do something about it. And they said, thank you very much. And we met with the FBI gang unit, told them, listen, this is a serious organization. Thank you very much. And
5 years later, they're federally indicting a lot of these guys.
now
on what we told
somebody
them was
decided
going on
to do
5 years
something.
ago.
Yeah.
Really?
now the FBI is interested. But I mean, we tried. We knocked on all the doors, and
It's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
We would love to hear more. I know that Jim is heading out the door. He's trying to get out of here. So let me just wrap this episode of Felony Miami up. We like to ask a question because all of us come from a musical background that got into this show. And so we like to ask our guests what they're listening to musically this week, last week. Who you playing in your car? Something old, something new?
A, B, C, D.
I have-
Oh, you got some kids now.
Yeah, my 8-month-old.
I have serious. So I go from Soul Town to the Beatles to Howard Stern. I rotate through that. I like Motown. I like to listen to a lot of Motown.
Nice.
I would
And the
say
Beatles.
I listen to good music.
And the Beatles.
It doesn't matter.
As
It
a
can
friend
be,
of mine says, the Beatles.
The Beatles.
I'm such a wide range too.
Who you
It's
got?
just-
Anybody new that you're focusing in on?
Not really. No.
Just the oldies?
No, some new stuff, but more the oldies.
I'm a Sinatra man myself.
Okay.
Oh, I have that too.
Some
I
Tony
listen to
Bennett
some-
in there,
Tony
little
Bennett,
little Dean
people-
Martin.
Absolutely.
Gotta
One
love
of the
that
best
Dean
singers
Martin.
in the history of the
Come
world.
on, amazing.
Best.
Love that guy.
You know, he was. He spoke Italian before he
Sure.
spoke English.
And he was
No
from
way.
Ohio.
Yeah, Steubenville.
He was from
So
Ohio.
when you hear him sing songs, his Italian
He did.
stands
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
That's
Truly
Samoan.
does.
it's
And
beautiful.
what's the other one that he sings? He sings in Italian too. There's a song that I listen to. Alexa, I put
Several.
I
He's
asked
outstanding.
Alexa, play Dean Martin or play Frank Sinatra. At home, I listen to that. It calms me down and calms the animals. I have dogs and animals, dogs, birds, and cats, and they seem to calm down when Frank starts to sing.
Nice. Well, for the Felony Miami crew, I'd like to thank our guests today. I'm your host, Joe Stone. Don't forget to check us out online at felonymiami.com. Listen to us on Spotify or Apple Music or any of your favorite RSS feeds. Give us a like, make a comment, tell your friends about us. We'll see you next time.
Well, it's early on Hannah morning. Then when I ride, Lord and Mama. Well, it's early in the morning. Then when I ride, well, it's early in the morning. Baby, when I ride, baby,